Mike and Danny. Mike was a quiet man. He lived alone in a small house in the countryside. The winters were very cold there. One evening, Mike walked home from the local market. He carried a bag of groceries and wore a warm coat and a thick scarf. The wind was strong, and snow covered the ground, making it slippery. Mike walked slowly and carefully. Outside his house, Mike had a large pile of firewood. As he passed by it, he heard a soft sound. It was a quiet cry, almost like a small baby. Mike stopped and listened. The sound came from between the pieces of wood. He bent down and gently moved some logs aside. Then he saw a tiny puppy. The puppy was very small, and his eyes were still closed. He was shaking from the cold. Mike felt a strong pity for the little pup. He knew the puppy could not survive in the cold. So, he took off his scarf and wrapped it around the puppy. "Don't worry, little one," Mike said. "You will be safe with me." Then he carried the puppy inside his house. Mike had a small fireplace in his living room. He lit the fire and placed the puppy in a basket near the warm flames. The puppy was so small he could hardly move. Mike gently patted the puppy's tiny head. He thought about giving the puppy a name. After a few moments, he decided on Danny. "Danny, you are home now," Mike whispered. "I will take care of you." The puppy whimpered softly, but Mike saw that the warmth of the fire helped him relax. Mike took a clean cloth and dried Danny's fur. Then he gave him a little warm milk in a small dish. The puppy tried to drink, but he was still very weak. Mike stayed beside him to make sure he was safe. That night, the wind outside was loud, but inside Mike's home, it was calm and warm. Mike lay in his bed, listening to the crackling fireplace and Danny's soft breathing. Mike smiled a little. He was alone before, but now he had a small friend to care for. Over the next few days, Mike did everything he could to help Danny grow stronger. He fed him warm milk, kept him in a soft blanket, and talked to him often. Slowly, Danny opened his eyes. They were big and brown, shining with curiosity. He began to notice Mike. The puppy wagged his tiny tail and tried to walk toward Mike when he heard his voice. Mike felt happy in his heart. He did not talk much, but he had a lot of love to give. He was patient with Danny. When Danny tried to walk and fell, Mike lifted him gently and said, "You can do it. I believe in you, Danny." Soon, Danny could walk around the living room. He followed Mike around the house, stumbling but determined. On sunny days, Mike took Danny outside to explore the backyard. Danny sniffed the grass and looked at the sky. Everything was new and exciting for him. As Danny grew, Mike saw that Danny was no ordinary dog. Danny seemed to understand Mike's words and feelings. When Mike spoke, Danny tilted his head and looked into Mike's eyes. When Mike was sad or tired, Danny lay beside him and gently placed a paw on Mike's knee, as if to say, "I'm here. You are not alone. Mike worked as a carpenter. He had a small workshop in the backyard, where he made wooden chairs, tables, and other items to sell. Sometimes neighbors came to buy his furniture. Other times, he took his work to the local market. Every morning, Mike went to his workshop to continue his projects. He brought Danny with him. Danny lay on a soft rug near the door, watching Mike saw, hammer, and shape the wood. The noise did not scare Danny because he trusted Mike. When Mike took a break, he would pet Danny's head and say, "How's my little helper?" Danny could not speak, but he wagged his tail happily, as if to say, "I am here for you." Mike's life was simple. He woke up early every day. He made eggs and toast for breakfast, sometimes with a bit of bacon. He also gave Danny a little bowl of food. After breakfast, Mike checked the mailbox for the newspaper. Sometimes he asked Danny, "Can you fetch the paper for me?" Danny learned this quickly. He trotted to the mailbox, took the newspaper in his mouth, and brought it back to Mike. Mike called him a smart dog. After reading the newspaper, Mike cleaned the house. Then he worked in his workshop. Danny watched him or took naps in the sunlight. When Mike finished work, he and Danny went for a walk around the village. People there knew Danny well. They waved and said, "Hello, Danny," or, "What a good dog you have, Mike." Danny wagged his tail at everyone. He was friendly to all, but his greatest love was always for Mike. Snow covered the ground for many weeks, and sometimes the roads were blocked. Mike's house had a fireplace, which he kept lit. Danny lay close to the fire to warm his paws. Mike liked these quiet moments. Sometimes, he carved small wooden figures by the fire. He even made a tiny wooden figure of Danny. When he was done, he showed it to Danny. "Look, Danny, this is you," he said, smiling. Danny sniffed it and wagged his tail. Because of the cold, Mike's workshop was too chilly to work in for long periods. He decided to focus on smaller projects inside the house. Danny stayed close, making Mike feel less lonely. Sometimes, Mike felt sad living by himself, but Danny brought new joy to his life. Mike talked to Danny like a friend. "I used to feel lonely here," he would say. "But now I have you. Thank you for being here, Danny." Danny rested his head on Mike's knee, as if trying to comfort him. This simple act made Mike feel much better. One day, a neighbor named Mrs. Brown came to see Mike's wooden chairs. She brought her son, Tim, who was around 10 years old. Tim saw Danny and wanted to pet him. Danny was gentle, so Tim rubbed his ears and belly. Mrs. Brown watched and smiled. "Your dog is so sweet," she said. "He is a real treasure." Mike nodded. "Yes, Danny is very special. He listens to me and keeps me company. I don't know what I would do without him." Mrs. Brown liked the wooden chairs and bought two. Mike was thankful for her support. As Mrs. Brown and Tim left, Tim asked, "Can I come back to play with Danny?" Mike smiled and said yes. After that, Tim sometimes visited, and he and Danny played catch in the yard. Their laughter made Mike's home feel warm and lively. When spring arrived, the snow melted, and flowers grew in Mike's garden. He built a small fence around the garden to protect the flowers. Danny watched as Mike dug holes and placed wooden stakes into the ground. Mike spoke gently to Danny, explaining what he was doing, as if Danny understood every word. One day, Mike said to Danny, "Let's build a small doghouse for you. You need a place of your own." Danny tilted his head, looking curious. Mike spent a few days gathering wood, measuring and cutting it. He built a sturdy doghouse under a big tree and painted it blue. Danny looked excited. He sniffed the doghouse, then went inside and sat proudly. Mike laughed. "It looks like you approve." On sunny days, Danny often rested in his doghouse while Mike worked on furniture. But whenever Mike left the workshop, Danny followed him closely, not wanting to be far away. One summer day, Mike felt very tired and dizzy. He thought it was because of the heat, so he drank water and sat down. But he still felt weak. He tried to keep working, but his body would not let him. He almost fell down, but Danny ran to his side and barked loudly, like he was calling for help. A passerby heard Danny barking and ran over. They found Mike pale and weak. The person called for an ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, they took Mike to the local clinic. Danny tried to follow, but the nurses said, "We are sorry. No dogs allowed." Danny stayed outside, watching the door where Mike disappeared. A few hours later, Mike felt better. The doctor said he was very tired and dehydrated from the heat. "You must rest, Mike," the doctor said. "Do not push yourself too hard." When Mike came out of the clinic, Danny ran to him, wagging his tail wildly. Danny licked Mike's hand, as if asking, "Are you okay?" Mike patted Danny's head. "I'm fine, boy. Thanks to you." After this health scare, Mike understood just how important Danny was. Danny was not just a pet, he was family. That evening, Mike gave Danny a special treat. "Thank you, Danny, for saving me," he said. Danny's eyes looked full of love. From that day on, Mike took better care of himself. He drank more water, took short breaks, and did not work too late. Danny was always near him, making sure he rested when needed. Mike often said, "Danny, you take care of me as much as I take care of you." They walked around the village every day. Neighbors noticed how close they were. Some said, "I have never seen such a loyal dog." Mike felt proud and smiled whenever he heard those words, patting Danny's head in thanks. Whenever Mike sold a piece of furniture, he bought a small treat for Danny, sometimes a new toy, other times a special snack. Danny always greeted Mike with excitement when he came back from the market. Mike's home felt full of life now. The rooms were still simple and quiet, but Danny's presence made them warm. On cold evenings, Mike sat by the fire, and Danny curled up at his feet. Sometimes, Mike talked about his past, his dreams, or his sadness. "I lost my parents many years ago," he said one night. "I have no brothers or sisters, so I grew up alone. Now I have you." Danny listened quietly. He could not speak, but he understood Mike's feelings. His gentle friendship was enough to comfort Mike. Time passed. Danny grew from a tiny puppy into a strong adult dog. His coat was shiny, and his eyes were bright. He learned new tricks quickly. Mike taught him how to roll over, play dead, and even bring small tools when Mike asked for them in the workshop. Mike, however, was getting older. He walked more slowly. But Danny was always with him, ready to help. If Mike dropped a tool, Danny picked it up. If Mike felt tired, Danny stayed close until Mike felt better. Even though Mike grew older, he still loved making furniture. He just worked more slowly. Danny stayed by his side, making sure Mike did not work too hard. Sometimes Mike said, "Come on, Danny, let's take a break." Then they walked to a tall tree and rested in the shade. One evening, a big storm came to the countryside. The wind blew hard, lightning flashed, and thunder boomed. Rain hit the roof like small stones. Mike and Danny stayed inside, listening to the storm. Mike was not scared, but he worried about the strong wind. "I hope the old tree is okay," he said. Danny paced around nervously. He did not like thunder. Mike tried to calm him. "It's okay, Danny. We are safe here." He lit a small lamp, in case the lights went out. The storm lasted all night, and neither of them slept well. In the morning, the storm was gone. Mike went outside with Danny to see what was damaged. A few branches had fallen, and the ground was muddy. Danny's doghouse was still standing, but some paint had come off. Mike gave a little laugh. "We have some repairs to do." Danny barked happily, glad everything was mostly fine. That day, Mike fixed the doghouse. He replaced a few boards and repainted it. Danny stayed close, watching him work. Mike remembered the day he first built the doghouse and felt grateful to share these moments with Danny. The next few years were calm. Mike and Danny enjoyed many happy times. Sometimes, Tim visited to play fetch with Danny. Other neighbors dropped by to say hello. In the evenings, Mike and Danny watched the sunset. Mike often told Danny about his day, the people in the village, and the things he wanted to build next. Danny also got older, and a bit of white fur appeared on his coat. He moved more slowly but still walked with Mike every day. He never left Mike's side. Mike often said, "Danny, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. I am never alone because of you." He believed if he had not found Danny on that cold night, his life would be much lonelier. Now, he had a true friend. One very cold winter night, Mike went to bed as usual. He felt a little tired but did not worry. Danny curled up at the foot of the bed, keeping Mike's feet warm. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of an old clock. In the morning, Danny woke up and waited for Mike to rise. But Mike did not move. Danny gently pushed Mike's hand with his nose. Mike's hand felt cold. Danny let out a soft whine and licked Mike's cheek. Still, Mike did not respond. Mike had passed away in his sleep. He left the world peacefully, without pain. Danny did not fully understand death, but he sensed something was wrong. He barked softly, trying to wake his friend. But Mike was gone. Later, Mike's relatives came. They found Danny lying next to Mike, refusing to leave. They gently moved Danny aside to prepare Mike for a small funeral. Danny watched everything with sad eyes. His ears drooped, and he made no sound. Mike's relatives arranged a simple funeral at the local cemetery. Some neighbors and friends came to say goodbye. Tim was there, holding his mother's hand, tears in his eyes. He remembered the kind old man who made wooden chairs and told funny stories. Danny also came. He sat quietly next to Mike's small wooden coffin. When the coffin was lowered into the ground, Danny watched with sadness. He let out a soft whine but did not bark or howl. It seemed he understood this was the final farewell. After the ceremony, people left. Some relatives spoke about taking Danny home, but Danny did not follow them. He stayed near Mike's grave. Nobody wanted to force him to leave. They thought he might need time to understand what had happened. In the following days, Danny kept visiting Mike's grave. No matter if it rained or the sun shone, he walked to the cemetery and sat by Mike's grave. Sometimes he lay down and rested his head on the cold earth. Sometimes he whined softly, as if calling for Mike to return. The villagers noticed Danny's devotion. They brought food and water to him. Some tried to take him home, but Danny always found a way back to the grave. One elderly woman said, "That dog's love is beyond words. He is waiting for his master, even though he knows he is gone." People in the village admired Danny's loyalty. They shared the story of Mike and Danny with their children. It became a symbol of love and devotion in the town. Months turned into years. The seasons went from winter to spring, then summer to autumn. Still, Danny visited Mike's grave every day. Sometimes he stayed all day. Other times, he walked around the cemetery, as if searching for Mike. Some villagers continued to feed and pet him. As more time passed, Danny grew very old. His fur lost its shine, and he walked with a slight limp. His eyes became cloudy, but his devotion never changed. Even though he was weak, he still went to Mike's grave. It was his life's purpose and final duty. People often said, "What a faithful dog! He will never leave Mike." One quiet autumn morning, a gentle sun shone on the cemetery. A soft wind blew the leaves around. Danny slowly made his way to Mike's grave. Even though it was hard for him to walk, he did not stop. He lay down beside the grave. He closed his eyes and took a few slow breaths. A cemetery caretaker found Danny later that day. Danny had passed away quietly, lying next to Mike. It seemed his last wish was to be close to his best friend forever. The villagers decided to bury Danny next to Mike. They placed a simple stone for Danny, so man and dog could rest side by side. A few people gathered for a small ceremony. They shed tears not only for Danny but also for the beautiful bond he shared with Mike. Today, if you visit that small countryside cemetery, you will see two graves side by side. One belongs to Mike, a kind carpenter who lived a simple life. The other belongs to Danny, the dog he saved on a cold winter night. A simple plaque reads, "In loving memory of Mike and his faithful companion Danny, together forever." The story of Mike and Danny lives on in the hearts of the villagers. They tell it to newcomers, saying, "There was once a man who saved a tiny puppy. The puppy grew into a loyal dog, and they loved each other deeply. Even after the man died, the dog stayed by his side. Their bond was stronger than anything, even death." This story shows the power of love and loyalty. It reminds us that true friendship does not end. Mike was a quiet man who shared his life with a little dog that many people might have ignored. But through simple, everyday moments, they formed a bond that touched everyone who saw it. Perhaps the next time you see a stray animal in need or meet an elderly person who is alone, you will remember Mike and Danny. Their story teaches us to show kindness and loyalty wherever we can. In these small acts, we find the greatest love.